It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today we'll be looking back at our Derby Day defeat at Brentford. It was 3-2 in the end, a disappointing evening. Our first trip with fans to the GTEC Stadium, and not one we'll look back on fondly. We'll analyse everything that happened in the game and get through a stack full of your questions. Our Fulham feeling the fatigue of recent matches, what has happened to some of our standout performances. We'll get into all of that on today's podcast. And I am joined by, first of all, Jack Kelly. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Isabelle Barker. Hello.
Hi, how are you, Sammy?
Good, thank you. And Drew Heatley. Hello.
Hey.
All right. Let's do some three-word reviews from last night. First of all, Drew, what were the best/worst ones that came in?
Yeah, there were quite a few, quite a few good ones actually. On both sides of the fence, there was a lot of betting puns in there, which was quite funny. So, Fulham fan base, the house wins. The house always wins. Sadly for us last night.
That's brilliant.
We got Matt Wall 88 betting against Europe. We're not quite there yet, but there was a dent, wasn't it? I think we can all agree. Fulham fan news, Fulham transfer perspective is needed. Something that I'm struggling with, but I think is very pertinent. Tom Greatrex, concentrate on cup, which I think we can all agree with. We can just focus on the cup now, can't we? Now the elusive fourth place is probably done and dusted. And a real fun one from Sol Bamba. He does come up with some good ones, doesn't he? Bees means fines, which made me laugh.
That's exceptional. Well done, Sol.
That took me a while.
I really wanted to say it right without messing it up, so we win on that.
Yeah, very good, Sol. All right, let's get into the analysis, the breakdown of last night's game. I'll start with you. You were kind of in a more neutral position in the press box, although probably surrounded by thousands of insufferable Bees fans, no doubt. What was your view of the game? It just felt like it was always going against us from the first whistle. We had a good end of the first half. We managed to get ourselves back into it, but second half was so limp from Fulham, and it's been so rare that we say that, really. I just think that it was probably a deserved defeat.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Brentford, what they're so good at is starting, super quick, super confident. And we just didn't deal with that consistent pressure. We just looked really sleepy. Obviously, everyone will kind of look at the suspended João Palhinha as the reasons, maybe, but as a collective, I felt like we looked so sleepy. Big names like Willian and players like that just looked a bit off. And that was really worrying. We weren't able to make those kind of inch-perfect crosses and things like that. And they just had this consistent pressure and we couldn't soak it up. And obviously they were rewarded within just 6 minutes. And obviously when we weren't without Palhinha the last time, it was that Newcastle game and we shipped 4 goals. So I guess it does have a part to play in it. But, as I was saying, I covered a lot of Brentford's games and they do that so well, that confidence and that pressure early on. And I just felt the game plan was really off and it just kind of set the tone for the whole game, really. I just had a really bad feeling about it. And I've been covering the kind of Brentford press conference before and they were so confident. They'd been on such an amazing run. It's annoying because it feels like we were playing each other and still, besides Palhinha, there shouldn't have been a reason why we were, in my opinion, so bad. But it wasn't a great day.
I mean, Jack, it just felt like Brentford have obviously had a couple of weeks off. They haven't been playing in the Cup. They didn't have the match the weekend before because they were supposed to be playing United, who were in the Carabao Cup final. So they had 2 weeks going into this game. And I remember thinking, well, Fulham have still had a decent run into this game. We still had 6 days after that Leeds game. I didn't think fatigue would be an issue. And if anything, I thought it might suit Fulham for the fact we were kind of more match sharp. But actually, you could tell pretty quickly that Fulham were just looking a bit leggy out there for a lot of this match. Although I have to say that, and I said in it is the question to Iz as well, there was a period in that first half, about half an hour, where Fulham were dominant against Brentford. But second half, the energy wasn't there. It felt like a lot of what's been great about Fulham this season just didn't come to the fore.
No, I think Brentford set the tone early on with their early chances, but you can argue that in the last 4 games, including last night, we haven't performed at our very best at all. I think the Leeds game, apart from 2 worldies, we were quite lucky to get through. Brighton, obviously, we were dominated and still managed to get the winner. In the Wolves game, we had to come from behind. So the performances of late have not been up to scratch. And you do go through periods like this in a season where it doesn't quite click. And Brentford came out sharp last night, and the goal was difficult. Obviously, it's a deflection, but you're right. There was a spell before half time where we had a lot of the ball. We weren't creating loads of chances with it. Brentford defended very, very well in parts, but there were signs of life there. I thought the final ball, particularly from Robinson and Willian, just lacked a little bit of pizzazz. And Mitrovic was quiet. And to be fair, if Mitrovic isn't firing all cylinders, the whole team itself is below par. And you can look at Pereira, as is said. He was a huge miss, and that void that that Reed had to fill and Lukic had to fill just wasn't quite up to scratch, and it's difficult. However, 10 defeats in all competitions this season, 1 in the cup, 9 in the league, 2 games where we've lost by 2 or more goals. It's still sensational stuff from Fulham, and if we look at this season in hindsight, we're going to be very, very proud of ourselves. It's just the fact that it's Brentford. At least we beat Chelsea. At least we drew to Chelsea and beat Brentford earlier this season. It's just one of those ones, and the grass will be greener on the other side, I'm sure, when we go to the next week's game against. Well, actually, maybe not because it's Arsenal, but hopefully there will be better days to come. There will be better days.
Yeah, we are on a tough run, Drew. And, we've picked up some wins where we maybe didn't expect, particularly that Brighton win. And that's meant that Fulham are still, heads are above water. But, this fight for Europe, it's a tricky one, really, because it's obviously disappointing if Fulham do drop out of this kind of race for Europe. But at the same time, we never would have expected to be here. So you can't be too disappointed. But it's just natural, isn't it, that there was an opportunity of something and it's kind of slipping away. And that is kind of hard to take, really, no matter how much you try and tell yourself that, we shouldn't have been in that position anyway, and we'd have bitten your hand off to be here at the start of the season. It's always disappointing when actually something becomes possible and then suddenly isn't possible.
Yeah, I think we were talking about in the pub before the game yesterday. It's human nature to always want more. No matter what happens, at the beginning we'd have said 17th goal difference, but then, you get to December, you get to January, and here we are in the upper echelons of the Premier League. And of course, then we start looking forward. They've got 40 points, as you said, Sammy, pinned on the notice board in Motspur Park. And, obviously we're sort of stuttering to that point, but as fans, we don't think about necessarily the 40 points. We dare to dream, and that's what it's all about. I think allow us to start to hope that we could possibly go to Latvia and Belarus and wherever else that we might have ended up, and we could still end up. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, I wouldn't bet against a top 10 finish. I'm sure Ivan Toney wouldn't either. I wouldn't bet against a top 10 finish this season still, and I'm not. Today it's like Jack said, right? It's just a shame it was Brentford. Like that is, we were always going to run out of steam. I think the last sort of 5 games, as Jack already said, we rode our luck. I think it's fair to say in 1 or 2 of those games. So I remember, a few years ago, we always used to say, we get a thrashing is coming. We're gonna dish out a thrashing to somebody. And I think we've all sort of thought in the back of our minds that a loss is coming. And it's obviously it was 3 goals conceded last night, which is more than we've done in the last few games put together. But everyone's just a bit leggy. You saw it against, you saw United on the weekend against Liverpool. They were just absolutely knackered after playing a game every 3 days for the last however long it's been. And although we've not had that relentless pace of games, we've got a smaller squad than other clubs in the Premier League, and it's paper thin. The depth, the quality of the depth. We've got bodies, but it's the quality of the depth, and I think it was a mixture of those 2 things yesterday.
Yeah, it is. And it was just such a shame that Fulham didn't survive that early pressure. I think it was kind of inevitable, wasn't it? Going to the G-Tech and, obviously it's their cup final. They were going to be up for it. They hadn't played for 2 weeks. They came out the blocks. I think we could have expected that. And just to fold after 6 minutes, concede that goal from Ethan Pinnock. I mean, there's nothing that Ream or Leno really could have done, but you've allowed someone to have a swing at it from outside, from just inside the box, and then those things kind of happen. It was just a shame because you saw as that half went on, if we'd have just got through that first 10 minutes and not fallen as we did, then I think it could have been a very different game the longer it stayed at 0-0. It was just so disappointing to fall behind like that.
Yeah, and like you say, it wasn't alien to us. Marco Silva knew what they were going to come out with, and we'd seen them do it against the likes of Liverpool at home and get amazing results. But like you said, if we'd have weathered that storm, the result could have been so different early on. Because I think I read from our very own Peter Rutz's article this morning that Brentford had 6 shots inside the opening 8 minutes and then 5 in the next 75. So it is a real shame. But it could have been uglier in those first 5 minutes. You know, if Brian and Buemo had hit the target or we hadn't had the heroic save of Leno, you know, it could have been a lot worse. So. And it's not good in a derby game. You know, it's going to have that aggressive, fast-paced nature, and we didn't deal with it. I felt like we didn't look as kind of like up for the derby feel as we did in the first game. I felt like Brentford's players looked more cheeky and aggressive, and they were kind of up for the antics of a derby, whereas we weren't really feeling it as much. And I don't know if that had a part to play in it as well.
Yeah. Jack, Brentford went close to making it 2 with 2 free kicks that were extraordinarily close. I didn't realise how close the Buemo. I noticed that Tony hit the kind of angle on his free kick. I didn't realise quite how close Brian Buemo's was. That was a brilliant free kick. But actually, it was Fulham's free kick that got us back into the match. And I've had a feeling about Andreas Pereira. He must be the best free kick taker in the Premier League that hasn't scored this season. He is so close with every free kick, and he couldn't have got any closer last night. Like physically, millimeters lower, and it's his goal. Fortunately, though, it led to Mana Solomon getting his 5th in 5 games. What a run he's on! But yeah, I just want a moment almost to appreciate Pereira's free kicks, because I mean, he deserves to have scored like 2 or 3 this season. He's come so close so many times.
Yeah, no, it's true. His technique's very good. He gets the ball up and down very well. The one against Nottingham Forest, and there was one against Leeds, I think, just before half time as well. Yeah, he's got good technique, and actually, I think it sort of hits the angle of post and bar, and then it quite kindly falls to Solomon. It's a great reaction from Solomon to manage to nestle that one into the back of the net. Yeah, Pereira's great from a dead ball situation, not only free kicks, but corner deliveries as well. A few assists for him this season. There was an instance in the game where I think in the second half, we did that thing where we play the ball out to the edge of the box from a corner and try and catch them out. Didn't quite work out that way in the second half. But Pereira's contributions this season off the ball and from dead ball situations especially have been the real positives I've seen from him this season. But it was a cracking effort, wasn't it? And brilliant that Solomon could get his head to it and, well, for that time, equalise for Fulham.
Yeah, the Mana Solomon saga, I think, is going to rumble on whether he stays or goes. Bloody Fabrizio Romano timed his little tweet, didn't he, that old Solomon's assessing his options or whatever, like 10 minutes after we lost the derby. It's just like, come on, Fabrizio, let's leave it for one day, would you? We're all pissed off enough about having to read that on the bus on the way home. Drew, there was a couple of refereeing decisions that were very questionable in the first half. Let's come on to the first one. Should Sasa Lukic have been sent off?
Yes. I mean, I think it would take the most ardent Fulham fan and Sasa Lukic fan to say that he didn't. It didn't help us, but well, maybe it did. We don't know. But yeah, I think it probably was. It was an interesting one, though, wasn't it? He said it was a genuine attempt to get the ball, and I think it probably was, but I don't think necessarily that's always the point. And but equally, look, not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Thanks very much, but you did ruin it with another contentious decision that I'm sure you'll get onto in a bit. So swings and roundabouts, I believe, is the phrase.
Well, then, Drew, I'll come on to the second one. Should Ivan Toney have stayed on the pitch for they kind of like the way he got kicked his head? It was. I didn't see it in real time. I had no idea until I saw people on Twitter talking about it. In real time, I had no idea it happened, but that's not an excuse. VAR is there literally to pick up things like this, surely.
Yeah, and that's exactly as I was saying. I think we were sat very, very close to each other in the ground, so we had the same sort of vantage point, and I didn't notice either. But then exactly that, we've got all of these different technologies at our fingertips, and the referee's ground level, he's got eyes as well. So there's many different failures there to spot. So yeah, I mean, again, yeah, he should have been gone, and it's a shame that would have really helped us probably. But it's like you say, we weren't, as he said, we weren't necessarily up for it in that sort of vigorous way, and Tony was probably a little bit too vigorous.
What was the view from the press box on those two decisions in the first half?
Yeah, so I was actually we got like a little call in from Mark Halsey, who's ex-referee, and he was saying that Tony was right to stay on the pitch. He is a QPR fan, to be fair, so maybe don't listen to what Mark Halsey says. But he said,
and I never forgive him for what he did when we lost to Arsenal 3-0.
So actually, don't listen to what I'm about to say. But yeah, he said Tony obviously caught Lukic with his boot, but that he said because the midfielder he'd slid in on the ground and it was accidental contact, then the referee made the right decision. And maybe he took into consideration, obviously, that Lukic was extremely lucky not to have been sent off before then, and that played a part in it as well. But he seemed to agree with Anthony Taylor for all of the decisions. But
has there ever been like a defence in court on an assault? He accidentally made contact with my boot outside the club, Your Honour. Like, come on.
Also, you have never seen a referee criticise the decision of a fellow referee ever. It's the most pointless. I mean, Peter Walton. Let's cross over to Peter Walton's so he can agree with what the referee just did on the field in some roundabout way. It's never Peter Walton going in on a fellow referee, is it? Oh, my God. Jack, then the penalty. I mean, again, one of those I had no idea. I mean, it's soft, isn't it? Like, yes, he catches him, but what's frustrating is because, I mean, if it was a VAR overturn, I'd have been fuming. But I guess if the referee sees it, he sees it. But, I mean, Brentford players barely appeal for it. Like, that's the thing that gets me. It looked a bit like Anthony Taylor wanted to just give a decision almost.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's just one of those ones that no one really saw coming. There was no real threat to the attack at that particular moment. And then the referee just points to the spot. I'd argue that Tony made more contact with Lukic than the foul that was in the box that the penalty was awarded for. Make no mistake about it, Tony will get his comeuppance in some way. It's just a bit of a disgrace that it's going on for this long, and he can score and do all these celebrations and tweet all these things and make all these horrible, weird references. Look, he will get his comeuppance, and when he does, that's it. He won't be able to play. I mean, but the penalty's fine. I mean, keeper goes the right way, but I don't really have much to say about it, really. I don't.
The penalty was the only decision which Marco was really vocal about. He wasn't that bothered about any of the other ones or who stayed on the pitch or what, but it was just the penalty. He said, this is an aggressive derby. We're going to see play like this. It was such a soft touch and it's such a harsh penalty to give. So that was the only one he was really fuming about in the press conference. And I have to agree with him. It did seem really soft and really harsh, but yeah.
It wasn't a decision befitting of the occasion. You're absolutely right. And I think it's the one that annoys me the most, because that ended the game, really, didn't it? So it was, you can talk about, as you say, the ones who stayed on and ones who left, but that was the one that changed the game. And it was so soft, not even a word. So yeah, it definitely wasn't befitting of the derby.
I think, look, and I know that decisions tend to even themselves out over time, but I think back to when Willian didn't get that penalty against Everton, for instance, and that was more contact that day. And yeah, Fulham have had a few decisions go our way this season, but that one did just feel come on, man. That is that. I think when opposition players aren't appealing, I think you've got to ask yourself a question, really. Players will always appeal for absolutely anything and everything. So if they're not appealing, your alarm bells should be ringing in your head. But fortunately, the slow-mo replay kind of just about justifies it, and VAR can't overturn something when there is a bit of contact. But yeah, just a bit disappointing as well, Drew, how close Burnley came.
Oh, I know, and that's it. And when you're
how
on
magic that would have been.
I know.
Yeah.
It would have been one of the moments of the season, wouldn't it? And then I would have loved everybody to run up to Tony in his face and do the Mitro hands celebration to him, the little slug. Like, the thing is, like, he gets all the benefit of the doubt from the broadcasters, but fans might give him a bit more sympathy if he wasn't such a little wanker, little wind-up merchant. So, that would have been absolutely excellent. But when you're on a run like that, with penalty, I think it's like 22 and 22. I read this morning. I mean, you're going to get the rub of the green. Add me to the Brian's gun compilation. You're going to get the rub of the green, and he did. So it's just a shame.
Yeah. I don't understand. I don't understand why Sky Sports specifically are so up his arse. I mean. No,
the narrative is really terrible. It's like
strange.
Tony's the victim here.
It's strange because he's got this investigation pending over him, yet they're just feeding the narrative that he's this great striker. Well, where were you at the World Cup? I don't get it. Like, I don't understand why he's getting so much praise when he literally has this cloud over him, which is going to come to fruition at some point, and then they can't say anything.
Well, it's like, are you not able to be blamed for something? If you commit a crime, if you're good at what you do, does that absolve you of any blame? It's a really weird thing to ask.
It is just odd. I mean, it is just odd that he is playing. Like, there can be no bones about that. The fact that he has admitted these breaches. And, the rules are there for a reason. And I do get the argument of, like, look, betting in football is, a massive issue, and he has spent his life holding up trophies with gambling sponsors on that. I do get the sympathy on that a little bit, but ultimately he's admitted an offence here, and yet he's still being allowed to play. Like, how long is this going to take?
In any other walk of life, in any other profession, if you admit to wrongdoing, you will be suspended pending an investigation. Right? Yeah. So why is he still on a pitch? Why is he still playing? He won't ever get picked for England ever again because Southgate won't stand for that. So it's ridiculous.
Fuck Ivan Toney. But, like, regardless, I think we shouldn't have. I don't know. It's annoying that he scored a penalty against us. Like, Ivan Toney can do that anyway, regardless of a betting thing. So it's kind of like, I still feel like we just kind of slightly have ourselves to blame a bit.
Yeah, we can look into all of the incidents, whatever you like. But actually, I think fatigue last night just showed, and that was why we lost, and that was why we didn't have the impetus that you needed, and that's that was the root of all of the problems.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it isn't that's the reason we lost last night, but it is just annoying. It is just frustrating. Yeah. I do get the point there. The third goal was particularly just rubbish. Marco made some changes that were just a little bit bizarre, really. Players like Cedric on for Tete, didn't really see why Tete needed to go off. Manor Solomon coming off, I didn't feel like was massively needed either. I could understand the Lukic one. He was on the thinnest of thinnest ice for the rest of that game, and also hasn't really got up to full 90-minute match fitness in the short time that he's been at the club. But it just didn't really work from Marco last night, did he? He tried to do a last throw of the dice, and if anything, it just made us weaker. Yeah,
for sure. Obviously, like the squad, the starting 11 was already, I felt like, wasn't settled. Wasn't like a settled starting 11 anyway. And I felt like Fulham have been really settled before, and then the changes that came on made us like even more unsettled in the game. Just looked really odd. Players that haven't gelled together, haven't been playing together, hadn't given us those consistent results. So they were really bizarre changes, and if it was to inject a bit of energy, if anything, but we looked even more sleepy. Kevin Shard, Brentford's new forward, outrunning Anthony Robinson, who's one of our quickest players, just kind of summed it up really to set up that third goal. So that was really disappointing. That was just a kind of Anthony Robinson being mugged off by Kevin Shade. Anthony Robinson's supposed to be one of our fastest players, but it was just really disappointing. It kind of all just fell to pieces, and it's just summed it up really that evening.
Why don't we put one of our keepers on?
Yeah,
we had two on the bench. We could have,
just for a laugh.
Well.
That is a point, though. Obviously, we had Luke back on the bench, and then this young goalkeeper as well. I don't know if you guys have any intel I don't know what the state of the squad was, the injury list and things like that, but why we had those two on for the Brentford game was a bit baffling. I thought it was maybe a bit too much for Luke that game to be on the bench.
Yeah, I just don't think there's enough players. I think there ultimately just isn't enough in the squad, and with the injuries that we've got to the likes of to Kearney, it's and then Polinia suspended. I just think that our squad is that thin that 2 or 3 injuries means that we're having to draw up third choice keepers in order to fill the places.
I can understand the Solomon substitution because Marco's been adamant that he's not ready to play 90 minutes at the moment. That will take time to build up. But you're right, Bobby De Cordova-Reid can slot into midfield anyway, so he was probably the only midfield option to bring on in terms of to play a slightly deeper in replacement of Harrison Reed or Sasha Lukic. I mean, we could have brought on Dan James for a bit of pace up top, but he hasn't really got a look in recently. Harry Wilson came on and didn't do much. I can understand bringing off Tete. He's played a lot of football recently, and maybe Suarez just gets a bit of minutes in his legs. But yeah, we were quite to the bare bones last night, and this Polonia suspension has hit us hard, really, I think.
Yeah, it really has. Obviously, Fulham did score a consolation to level up the scores on aggregate for the season against Brentford, which was nice. Well done, Carlos. A 99th minute consolation. I don't think there were many Fulham fans in the away end to see it. I think a lot, including myself, had made a dash during stoppage time to try and forlornly catch a train from Kew Bridge before the hordes of Brentford fans got onto it. Had fun going home. Nice of them to tell us that Gunnersbury Station isn't open for an hour after kickoff. That was really fun when I got there to find the barriers closed, and it was a long way home and not a very fun experience having to get home after watching that. But that's always the way with derby days. They're amazing when you win them, and they're horrific when you lose them. And fortunately, we've generally had the upper hand in derbies this year, but that one was a particularly tough one last night. We're going to take a break here. Afterwards, we'll get into some of your questions. Part 2 of the Fulhamish podcast. It's Sammy here with Jack Kelly, Isabelle Barker and Drew Heatley. Let's get into some of your questions. Feels like a very different vibe on the questions from recent weeks where it's all been so celebratory. Definitely people with some some problems. There are some problems, and we'll try and get into them now. This has been a big talking point, I feel like, since last night's game. We briefly mentioned his ability from set pieces, but Andreas Pereira, Elliot asks this one. He says, do you think Pereira needs a rest? He's lost his directness/aggressiveness in the final third, and you can see we're lacking ideas except for going wide and lumping it in the box. Drew, Pereira has been magnificent this season. There has been, though, a bit of a drop-off. I wonder on the Pereira one, it feels a bit like there's a lack of competition for that spot, and I just wonder if that's a big part of it. Obviously, fatigue comes into it too. But yeah, I mean, I think there is not really a direct replacement for him in this side, especially with TC out as well, who can play that role, or maybe Bobby De Cordova-Reid can kind of play that role, but there's no one specifically that can do what Andreas Pereira does, and I just wonder if that's kind of catching up on us.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, as we've said before, it's definitely fatigue. But I think, yeah, you're right. Does he, in the back of his mind, does he think, well, there's not really anybody to replace me? I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because this is his sort of restorative season, isn't it? Coming into Fulham, doing really well. There's always been a bit of end product that was been a bit of a question mark, but there's no doubting his industry and his effort. So for him to come back to Premier League and have that season where it's almost his delayed breakout, it would be, I don't know if it would be necessarily in his nature to sort of let that drop off so soon. We still got a long way to go, regardless of whether we're safe or not. So, maybe it is just purely fatigue and more than a mental thing. But you're right. There's no one there for him. People were clamoring for us to take Fabio back in January on loan, and it was poo-pooed by many people, me included. But obviously, and I'm not saying we should have done, but it would have been an option to switch around. But yeah, a rest is not always a result of you're not good enough, we're going to drop you. It would be nice to give him a rest. sadly we can't. So it's we're going to have to keep flogging him for the next few months at least.
It's worth noting that he was involved in both of the goals yesterday, though. The goal we got in, it was he had a pop-up goal, and then it fell to Vinicius, and obviously he was involved in the Solomon goal as well. So he was involved. I don't think it was terrible. I think we need to maybe notice that as well. But obviously he's played every league game and every FA Cup game, so probably just needs a rest. And I think he obviously came from the Brazilian league, didn't he? So it means he's played a ridiculous amount of matches. I can't remember what it is, but he came halfway through their season or something. So yeah, probably just need a rest.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few more on the Pereira subject. Might as well read them out. They're not, Chaz says, why does Marco love Pereira so much? All he does is give the ball away, which causes us so many problems. Only a positive is his ability in dead ball situations, which conversely, Fulhamish on our Telegram chat said, would love to know the stats on goals from corners this season. We seem to have massively lost our threats recently, which is very true. We haven't, earlier in the season, it felt like we were scoring a goal from a corner or a set piece almost weekly. I believe, unless I'm mistaken, certainly in the league, the Southampton game was the last time that we scored from a corner. So it does feel like some of our dead ball threat seems to have disappeared. I don't know if that's a trend or if that's something that Fulham have changed, or we're just maybe teams have picked up on the fact that we're so good from set pieces is probably the most likely outcome there. Dom asks, do we have a slight issue that both our best wingers are left wingers? Willian was noticeably a lot less effective last night, and our RCM, Reed, never looked as good without Bobby playing on the right wing. Do we have to start Bobby right wing, or maybe even Harry Wilson should be there? Jack, it is a bit of an annoying one that, Solomon and Willian are our best wingers, but they both just look so good on the left, and Willian did look a bit lost on the right last night, and I do wonder if we missed Bobby on that right hand side.
Yeah, no, Bobby brings something different in terms of the trickery and pace that both Solomon and Willian bring. It's very vital to us in the final third. I do think that they are interchangeable. I think the game against Leeds, they switched wings a couple times in the first half. It's just one of those ones. I think that if Willian has played on the right quite a lot for Chelsea when he was at Chelsea, I think if his left is his strongest side, that's obviously vital to play, but vital for him to play in that position. But at the same time, I think that Willian gives us a little bit more than Harry Wilson does and Bobby Deagle do individually, just with his pace and his trickery, and he does come up with goals and assists. I would stick with those two, but you're right in saying that we do need a better right winger or a better option on that right hand side.
It's interesting. When I spoke to Solomon, he said that how kind of similar him and Willian are, and how much he kind of like not models his game off him, but like learns loads from him. And I guess it kind of suggests, he was saying himself, how they are really similar and how it's this really healthy competition that they have. So I guess maybe a different option would strengthen us potentially, or over time we will find them both working on both sides better. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see.
Drew, Lewis Stevens asks, why can't Anthony Robinson cross a ball? Which is obviously a bit harsh, but I do get his point. I mean, Anthony Robinson has 1 assist this season, and it was the goal that Solomon scored against Wolves, which is an assist in name. Wouldn't exactly say it was one of those where Anthony Robinson could claim it was his goal. It was definitely a piece of brilliance. It just happened to be that Anthony Robinson passed him the ball beforehand, admittedly with a very good decoy run as well that opens up the space for Solomon. But yeah, I just have this feeling, like when Anthony Robinson gets forward, and he gets forward brilliantly, and look, he's a good defender, but I just have this feeling that when Anthony Robinson's in a crossing position, he tries to put a ball in the box, I just know it's not going to, and especially even when he gets to the byline and stuff, just have this feeling deep down, I'm like, this isn't going to lead to anything. It's just going to be blocked, or it's going to be too far, or it's going to be difficult, like for one of the players. He does just seem to have a bit of a lack of ability of creating chances.
Yeah, and I think at some point you need to ask, is it negligence in the position? Because and that sounds like I'm being a bit of a knob, but the modern fullback is as much about getting forward and putting balls into the box as they are about defending. And it's not the late 90s where just being a tough tackling son of a gun on the flank is good enough. It's not anymore. And Anthony Robinson's always trod a fine line between being one of the best fullbacks in the world and one of the worst in the Championship. It's one of those funny things. He's always either showered with praise or pillory, absolutely hammered. So, and he's always trod that line. But I think, yes, bottom line is, I think questions should be asked because, as I said, the modern fullback is important for them to get balls in the box, and it's always been. Pre-Silver, for the last few years, it's been one of our biggest things that we do, especially since Mitro's come. So, yeah, it's not good enough, really, and that's the black and the white of it.
Jack, this is a pretty intense question from Dan. I'm almost scared to ask it. With Mitro being very hot or cold, is now the right time to cash in on him? I love him, but is it time for something different? And let me reiterate, I love the man. I'm just playing devil's advocate. No, I mean, you can't almost contemplate it, surely. He is just on a bad run of form, and it probably is a bit overreaction, really. Is it?
Why do fans automatically think that just because a striker goes 5 or 6 games without a goal, that means they should be sold or should be dropped? I don't get it. It's ridiculous. Think about Mitrovic's contributions in this whole entire time at Fulham. We are getting goals from all over the park. Solomon scoring 5 and 5. Vinicius cashing in on a goal last night. Willian scoring. He's allowed off games. I don't get it. He's proved himself this season as everyone wanted him to. He has done that. Just cut him some slack. I know it's devil's advocate. You caveated by saying that, but at the same time, it really frustrates me. Stick by your players. I guess
I don't think here, I mean, I'm going to stick up for Dan. I don't think he's criticising Mitro. I mean, yes, he's saying he's burned hot and cold and stuff. I guess the point is, Mitrovic is 28. He will be 29 in September. And he's on a big contract. If you were going to get big money for him, it is now. Yeah, now is the time where you could get big money for him. And there is potentially some sense to it. I'm not saying it's the right option, but I think that's maybe where Dan is coming to here.
In the system we play right now, there's no other better option up front than Mitrovic. He's irreplaceable.
What it would set us back in terms of a rebuild would be, it would be not worth any sort of money that you can get. But I appreciate that is the angle of the question. I think Mitrovic leaves Fulham when Mitrovic wants to go. I think he's earned that right. He could fleece me on a timeshare and take all my money and I'd still let him stay and I'd still cheer him from the hammy end. He has earned that right for me. But I appreciate that's definitely the angle, isn't it? But I just think it's the value to the club, and I just think you can't put a price on it. The amount of years it would set us back to adequately rebuild, not just a replacement, because you're not going to get another Mitrovic. It could even force a full change of style. It could be anything. So I don't think there's any amount of money that would make it worth it for us.
And you see clubs in this league who don't have strikers and how badly they are struggling. You look at Everton right now, you look at Wolves right now, like teams without that number 9, I think it's just not worth it. I think there is a potential question this summer of whether Mitrovic looks at his career and is like, this is the crossroads. I think this summer for him is like that one where he's going to have to ask himself, I either stay at Fulham and do as Wilfried Zaha and I'm here forever, but if I'm going to move and I'm going to try and, win a title, win a Champions League, or be part of a top 4 squad, I think this summer is that moment. And I think he will have to ask himself that. I'm hoping that he will just see that life's nice at Fulham, you've got it good, everyone loves you, and you're trying to go to PSG or Arsenal or Chelsea or whatever and be a backup striker and try and improve yourself again isn't that necessarily fun, or the grass isn't always greener. But I do think that conversation is coming up this summer for for sure for Mitro. A few more questions. This one's a little bit light. Fulham Catalonia says, when will the mint kit be banned? Awful and only brings defeats. I'm not a fan of having to support the mint chocolate chip team when I'm supporting Fulham.
Ban it. It's becoming like the curse of the mint green kit, isn't it? I feel like, who is it that had it? Like West Ham or someone, or Aston Villa hadn't won in their weird janky kit in like years until Emery turned up, and I don't want to follow that trend. Just get rid of it, all right? Get rid of the weird mint janky kit, and we'll all be happy. We always look so sleek in like a block color, just like a white, a black, even a red. I think we've had recently-ish, and Mitro's look so good in it. And yeah, I'm up for binning it, to be honest.
I thought Marco didn't rate it. I thought it was a decree from him to not wear the mint kit. And I think maybe Adidas were like, hang on a minute, guys, I think we need a little bit of airtime. But I thought he didn't like it.
I'd heard the same.
I've not heard that. That's great.
There'll be one more game I think we play in it, which will be Southampton away. Everything else we can wear white or black. So I wouldn't worry about it.
But will we though? Because when we played Brentford at the Cottage, we were in white and they were in red and white. So it's like there's
they were in black.
They're in black.
Were they?
Yeah.
Oh, they were in black.
Yeah.
You are right. But I have seen a game where we've opted for, we've played in white and somebody has played in a slightly clashed kit. I don't know what the rules are anymore. It used to be you wore your home at home and you wore your away in my day when we played two up top. No more.
Well, Sunderland, they played in red and white and we played in white.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And it was a red and white team. It baffles me.
I'm not really sure how it works, but we've had good success as well in the black this year as well. Like the Leeds win, I think we were in black. Like, let's just go back to black.
Mm-hmm.
As Amy Winehouse once said. Finally, this is a great question from John. We've struggled against Southampton, Everton, Wolves and Brentford, all of whom are teams who prefer not to dominate possession. Are we failing to set up teams who sit back and hit us fast on the counter? I mean, Jack, I think it's potentially an issue, and you can see why Fulham, would prefer almost to play against teams on the front foot. We have done very well against teams who kind of dominate us as opposed to the other way round, but also there have been games this season where Fulham have been fantastic against teams that have been sitting back as well. So I'm not 100% sure there's a trend there, but you might think different.
No, I think you're right. I think it's very difficult to maintain a level performance over a 38 game period and be consistent. There will be times where you sit back on the ball and you break well, and there'll be times where you dominate the ball and can't create anything. It swings and roundabouts of football, really.
All right, two final ones. Jack, this is definitely up your street. James Wilson says, last night absolutely sucks, but at the same time, which hand would you have bitten off in August if you were offered 7 points from West London Derby? Some positivity from James, which I'm sure that you'll be fully riding along with.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's fine to lose one out of those 4 fixtures is okay, especially when you're playing Chelsea twice and the squad they've got and the resources they've got. So, yeah, I mean, I would have taken it hands down, a last-minute winner against Brentford, a draw at the Bridge, a win at the Cottage against Chelsea. It's fine by me. It's not that deep.
I was actually asked that question at the beginning of the season, and I actually bit João Palhinha's hand, which is why he had a bandage on. Just an exclusive for you there.
There we go. Final one from Nick Austin. He said in 1904, Fulham chairman Henry Norris helped Brentford buy a leasehold on a 5-acre orchard that became Griffin Park. Why, in capital letters? And how do we undo this? Izzy, why do we do this? Why did we help create 2 of our biggest rivals? We obviously are the catalyst behind why Chelsea exist. We also helped Brentford exist. Why did we do this to ourselves? We could have had the whole patch to ourselves other than QPR. Like, why did we deserve this?
Oh, it's been fun though this season though. I feel like it's all been worth it for this season. All right, yeah, last night was bad, but like you say, 7 points from these West London derbies. We are still ahead of all the West London teams. We're in, what are we, 7th? Brentford is still 9th.
Yeah.
It's still looking really good. Obviously, we've got a game in hand over them, I think, but we've got
quite a few.
Yeah, so, but still, look at the achievements we've made this season. We're in 7th position. We've just lost that one against Brentford last night. Still a push towards Europe seems likely. We just need to sharpen up a little bit. So lots of positives to take. And I think it's been fun this season, the rivalries and the West London derby. I think West London has been the best kind of talking point of the season, and Fulham and Brentford, that rivalry, I think everyone knows about it now, and it's been exciting. And last night was just a little bit of a blip. But Drew, were you alive back then when that little bit of
I was a witness when they signed the contract. But it's important to remember as well that you're only as good as your rivals. You know, I heard once that without Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker was just a whiny little bitch. You need your enemies. You need your enemies to justify your own existence. So we saw that early on, and we took action. So fair play to us.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to look at a team like Reading, just out there in the middle of nowhere in the cold, trying to have a rivalry with Oxford or Swindon. Yeah. Like, you do need them in a way, but it could have been quite a nice life. It could have just been us and QPR.
Well, look at QPR. I mean, QPR right now, 20th in the Championship, top of the table in October. They are going absolutely nowhere, and they'll be very jealous of the fact that games like Brentford v Fulham are played on Monday Night Football on Sky Sports, albeit they speak more about Ivan Toney than anyone else in the whole coverage. I should let it go, shouldn't I?
Good point. A good point, though. A great.
You probably
point.
Should let it go.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. We all have our bizarre little things that wind us up and stuff. And Ivan Toney is definitely yours. All right, that'll do for the podcast today. The podcast will return on Thursday, looking ahead to the Arsenal game on Sunday, which is going to be a very, very difficult one. Once again, without Zhao in the middle. But if Bournemouth can get 2 goals against Arsenal, then surely their run of just somehow doing incredible epic comebacks has to end somewhere. So fingers crossed Fulham can take advantage of the fact that they do look a little bit porous at the back. But anyway, the full preview will be on Thursday's podcast. We'll also look ahead to everything that the Fulham Lilies are doing for International Women's Day. They've got a load of events coming up this week, which is hugely exciting, mostly centred around the Arsenal game. So we will look into those as well. Drew, just before we go, we need to name the pod. What did you think was the best 3-word review that deserves the title?
I think the best one, having looked at them all again, and there's some fun ones in there, but the one that sort of encapsulates where we're at the moment, and it's a bit negative, but hear me out. Betting against Europe, I think, sums it up at the moment. You know, I wouldn't bet against it, but some people might.
Well, I mean, the odds would be not that great, I think.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Tony knows. Only Tony knows. Sorry,
yeah,
stop it now. Come on.
All right, that'll do for today. Thank you very much to my guest, Jack Kelly. Thank you.
Cheers, Sammy. Thank you.
Drew Heatley, thank you.
Cheers, guys. This has been good group therapy.
And Izzy, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Pleasure. All right, as I said, we'll return on Thursday. Looking ahead to the Arsenal game. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll speak to you on later in the week. But until then, come on, you Whites.